Guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And with the combine, just a day away, starting tomorrow and going through Sunday, I figured we'd look at Daniel Jeremiah's updated his 2.0 top 50 prospect rankings to get a sense of where the top prospects are and maybe some of the under the radar guys that you should be watching at the combine. So, with no further ado, let's get into it. Start out with number one, which he has Fernando Mendoza, which I don't hate. I don't know if Mendoza is the true number one best player in the class, but he is the number one best quarterback and a guy who he actually compares to Matt Ryan, which I don't. I've seen that take a lot, which I don't hate, but it is interesting. I think like the true top players are probably like Jeremiah Love, Caleb Downs, Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, maybe Ruben Bain or David Bailey. Like the true like top players aren't guys who are probably gonna go um not they're not gonna go number one overall, but I think like those five guys, maybe six guys are like the true top players of this class, but DJ thinks it's Mendoza, and I don't hate the take because in a class where there's not many elite players, I don't hate the take that's saying Mendoza is just the best player in the class right now. But moving on to number two, which he has being Jeremiah Love, which, like I said, I mean, Love's one of the top, at least top five players in this class. So he's a true game changer, a true elite player in this class. He's not a generational running back prospect, by any means, but he's a elite prospect and like a true game changer. Like he's probably one of the few players in this class where if you just like wherever he gets drafted, he's going to have success. And I think Love maybe arguably could be the best overall player. Um, I have him, right there in like the top five ish, maybe even top three when it's all said and done. But another guy who probably won't work out at the combine just because a lot of the time the top guys don't usually work out just because they don't think they need to, which I understand you already have um film that shows you the best player, but probably another guy who won't participate along with Mendoza, but I think, you know, is one of the surefire best players in this class. So it makes sense to have him here. Number three's got David Bailey, which I think is interesting um just because Bailey, in my opinion, is the third best edge rusher behind both Reese and um both Reese and Ruben Bain, in my opinion. But um yeah, in my opinion, but I understand um putting Bailey up this high because like he has like he's a pure like edge rusher where it's like he's gonna be able to get after the quarterback, be able to get pressure or get after him. But like in my opinion, Reese and Bain are more so more complete players than Bailey. But I don't hate him. Like I said, Bailey's probably one of the top six players in this class, so I don't hate him putting him this high. Although I'd probably have a couple guys ahead of him. Around number four, he's got Arvell Reese, who he swapped spots with Bailey, and he compares him heavily to Jalen Walker, which I've been saying. Walker, Michael Parsons, like that type of archetype, even Abdul Carter, like a linebacker who more transitions to being an edge rusher. Um, Obviously Carter, his junior year is when he switched over to being edge rusher, not like Parsons or Walker or even Reese. But um, yeah, I said he's one of the top six, maybe top five, three players in this class just because of how versatile he is and how great he is. Um, and a guy who you can just move him around, put him in different spots, and it really goes to show that like that type of position where it's like you can be multiple on a defense, I think really is starting to become a bigger thing than people might be realizing. Went on to Sonny Styles, another Ohio State guy who, and like if you want to include Mendoza because of the QB, then like those top seven guys are like the clear cuts top seven guys in whatever order. And yeah, Styles, like he's gonna go a lot higher than most linebackers go because one, the class isn't that great, and two, he's like he is an elite player, and elite players go high. Now, him and Downs, both Ohio State guys, might go lower than you might believe just because positional value. Safety and linebacker is valued by a lot of teams. They usually tend to get those guys on day two and day three, and they work them out. Um, but Styles, an elite player, like there's no generational type players, which you might hear the media say there is a generational, but there isn't. They're elite players and elite prospects coming out, but they're not like generational where it's like they're going to be hits. They're going to be like so great that like they're going to be no doubt, Hall of Famers. Like there's no guy in this class where you can be like, oh yeah, they're for sure going to be a Hall of Famer. But there's plenty of guys who are elite prospects who I think, you know, when it's all said and done, could be Hall of Famers, but they're not guaranteed like generational prospects are seemingly said to be. Number six with Ruben Bain, which I'd have him a little higher just because he's my top overall edge rusher ahead of both Reese and um, Bailey, and I'd probably have him ahead of Styles because of positional value. But I mean, just like he's one of these elite players who's gonna go in the probably top 10 of this class just because of how talented he is. And he's just another guy where it's like he's going to be elite no matter what. Like all these guys have flaws, but like they're all gonna go pretty high just because in a class where there's not much top tier talent the way there usually has been in other classes, these guys are gonna go high and Bane, well, I would have him much higher than sixth. He still is in that top tier of prospects ahead of like the rest of the class. Went on to seven with Carnell Tate. Interesting. Um, and Tate actually moved up two spots from DJ's 1.0 top 50 prospects. Yeah, a lot of people have him as the wide receiver number one ahead of Jordan Tyson, ahead of Makai Lemon. Well, he plays at Ohio State because he's 6'3", 195, like the premier size you want for a receiver, even though we're seeing where it's like you don't need to have that type of size to be an elite receiver. But I have Tyson actually hesitate, even though Tyson seemingly is being pushed down because of the injuries and because he's an older prospect compared to the other receivers. Even though I think Tyson has kind of felt like, I know we're talking about Carnell Tate, but Tyson has kind of felt like Tedero McMillan from last year, where it's like everybody was, talking about him throughout the year, and then people wanted to start talking about Matthew Golden and then Emeka and McMillan. It was falling in people's mocks, and they were like, "Oh, this guy isn't going to go as high." And then he ended up going top 10 and being the best rookie receiver of the entire class. So, well, I do think Tate and Tyson and Lemon, I think like those three guys are like on a tier above of the rest of the receivers. Um, I personally have Tyson over Tate, but I don't hate having Tate. here, um, because he's going to be healthier and there's less cause for concern with Tyson. Moving on to 8 with Mansour Delane, which he's not my top corner. I have Jamal McCoy, but kind of like Carnell Tate, Delane's being put as the corner one right now because he was healthy in 2025. Like, if McCoy and Tyson had played full years, kind of like last year with Will Johnson, and even like Benjamin Morrison, like there's always guys who like coming into the year are seen as like top prospects, going to be elite players, but then they're banged up throughout the year, so they start to be pushed down because the medicals. And obviously, we'll learn a lot as these guys are coming to the combine, which I think most players either are there or are going to be there. So the medicals should be coming out on a lot of these guys. Um, but Delane, if he has a really good showing and proves that he can um be like an elite corner, because his size and arm length aren't like elite compared to like McCoy has the size and the speed, and like he has the prototypical corner size that teams want, but if Delane's able to show out at the combine, he could definitely secure himself being the top corner, especially if McCoy comes back that like he is still hampered by that injury and maybe Delane's able to be pushed up, but we'll just have to see. Went on to Caleb Downs, yeah. I mean, I would have him a little bit higher just because like he's a better player, a better prospect than both Delane and his teammate at Ohio State, Carnell Tate. But I get, not having the safety that high, saying, teams really value this guy as a um, top five, maybe top 10 pick when it's all said and done. But Downs is a tremendous player. Like a lot of people, I think, um, and I even saw a tweet out that said Downs was, like people were saying that he's smaller than like most safety size, but then like compared to guys like Troy Polamalu and Brian Branch and other elite safeties, um, like Downs is around that size. I think he's taller than Polamalu, around the same size as Brian Branch is. I don't see the complaining people have. I just think, like, I feel like sometimes people, because they talk about a prospect so much because of how great they are, and I feel like people then sometimes want to push them down because they want to say, "Oh, well, is this guy actually that great?" Instead of just saying he can be, an elite player once he steps onto the football field in the NFL. We're on to number 10 with Makai Lemon, who we dropped the least spots. Yeah, and I mean, he says he compared him to Amon St. Brown, which I've seen. I compared him to JSN, like that JSN Amon Ra size that Lemon has at I think 5'11", 195. So like he's not like the prototypical big body receiver the way Tate and even Tyson is. But like he showed in 2025 he can be an elite receiver. And we even saw a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba who in college was a mainly slot guy. We saw this past year that he can be an X, he can be an outside elite receiver. And Lemon can be that same type of receiver for whoever drafts him. And the Bolitnikov winner for a reason. So yeah, Lemon, I think 10. I mean, maybe it's the. I wanted to say it was too high, but in a class where there's not many elite players, Lemon kind of feels right in that 10, 11, 12 range being ranked as a prospect. Went on to 11 with Vega Owane from Penn State. Yeah, maybe the true best offensive lineman. You could argue Maui Noah, Fano at tackle. But Vega Uwane is going to give you elite guard play right away. He's not going to go as high as those tackles because of the position that he plays. But I mean, remember Tyler Booker last year? Like, not like most people were mocking him late first round, saying teams in the top 20 probably aren't going to select a guard that high. Well, the Cowboys did. They drafted him at 12th, and he had a decent rookie year, but there's potential there for him, and Vega Owane could go a lot higher. Like I've seen people mock him to the Ravens at 14. I think that's the highest I've seen him rank, but he could go to the Dolphins. He could go maybe to the Bengals at 10. Like he could go maybe a lot higher than people are saying because maybe a team like that says, "Hey, we'd rather draft a need and draft a guy who we know will be a good player instead of risking it on like maybe a guy who has potential but isn't there right now." Moving on to Francis Mauigoa. Speaking of the tackles, yeah, I mean he's my top tackle, and he's seemingly become the top tackle. Like for a while it was Fano, but now it seems like Mauigoa. Hopefully we see both those guys. Which I mean, you usually do see the top tackles. Like unlike the rest of the positions, tackles usually, no matter if like they're a top 5 pick or not, they usually go out there and participate in the combine, which I do like because you want to see the top players out there, you know, doing what they do, but not all players want to work out in the combine. They'd rather wait until the pro day or, just not work out at all the way, certain guys have in the past. But Maui Noah, and he's ranked like around the 12th, 13th, 14th, like around the middle of the first round. But he's going to go a lot higher because obviously the tackle need, and because in a draft where there's not many elite players, as I keep on saying, tackle is going to be pushed up the board, even if it's not left tackle, because that's usually the premium position that goes as high. But we saw Armand Memba, who was a right tackle, go inside the top 10. So we see right tackles, they're not usually top 10 picks because left tackle is the more premium tackle because it's the blind side of quarterbacks. But Maui Noah and Fano, who I think might be 13, um, will be, being pushed up the board because of that valuable tackle and because teams might just go need instead of trying to go with the best player available when it might not work out if you go BPA. So, it's Jamal McCoy actually. 13. Yeah, I mean, if McCoy had played this year, he'd be probably a top 5 player in this class, no doubt. He was an outstanding corner in 2024, and I mean, he lit up Tennessee as a player, but then he missed all of 2025, which led to his teammate Colin Hood um, having an amazing year and being able to push himself into the first round conversation. Um, but yeah, McCoy, like if he had played, he'd be a top 5 pick. Um, and if he shows out in the combine, like if he's fully healthy and there's nothing wrong, then Jamal McCoy will certainly um be what's the word? Will certainly go higher than Delane and possibly head of Downs and be the top DB um from this class draft position wise. And he could end up being the best corner. Like I said, he has the size, the talent. Like he has everything you want from like an elite corner to draft. It's just he missed an entire season. And when you miss an entire season, it usually tends to dock you. But if you were that elite in your freshman and sophomore year, you usually tend to go a bit higher because of how great you were. But on to Spencer Fano, um, 14. And yeah, I mean, Fano and now we know we're kind of battling for tackle one in this class. Um, a class that preseason was seemed to be an elite tackle class where if you needed a tackle, if you needed a premier tackle on either side, you were going to get one, but hasn't really worked out. Now, there still can be guys that go in the back half of the first round because tackle is such a valuable need, but you got these two guys, and then it's kind of like the rest of the tackles. And we'll see where some of these guys end up going. But Fano, who did play left tackle as a freshman, then moved over to the right tackle, um, because Caleb Lomu started playing left tackle. So he has tackle versatility, which you do like when a guy on the offensive line can play multiple different positions. Because then if you like put him at one, but then like one guy goes down with injury, you can move him over. And while it will take him adjustment period now in the NFL, he can be able to stick there um, for as long as they need him to. Going on to 15 with Emmanuel McNair Warren, which this is like usually around like the 15 spot in these rankings. It's usually where, a lot of people have different opinions because like it seems like there's like a clear top like 10, 12 guys, and then the rest of the class is kind of like, who you like as a analyst. And I mean, EMW has really risen up the board um, since the end of the year. And, another Toledo defensive back, he plays safety, not corner like Quinion Mitchell, but a guy who could be a top 20 pick, maybe go as high as maybe, I don't know. Like, I feel like his ceiling and floor for drafting is very, like, very differing. And a class where it felt like it was Downs and everybody else, we could see not just two, but maybe even three guys go in the first round because these safeties are starting to be more like valued because of teams run the ball more. So you need multiple safeties to be in there to be able to stop the run. And we could see teams value this position more than ever in the league now. We're on 16 with Kenyon Sadiq. Yeah, an elite um prospect. If it wasn't for him being a tight end and him not really having like that blue chip preseason hype the way guys like Colston Loveland, Brock Bowers, Kyle Pitts had when they were coming out, Sadiq probably is maybe a top 10 prospect and goes a lot higher because I mean, if a team wanted to, they could take him a lot higher than he probably will go. But the tight end position, one of the more undervalued positions, because teams, usually get those guys on day 2 and 3 and are able to make them work. But Sadiq, you know, and tight end is one of those positions where it's like you have an elite first round prospect and then everybody else. That running back um, are like two positions where it's like if you need that position, you need to take that guy in the first round because it's going to be probably a while until the next guy goes off the board. But Sadiq, phenomenal prospect and a guy who definitely will show out at the combine and maybe even rise up more than he already is. Um, Moving on to 17 with Jordan Tyson. Um, seven at 17. Um, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are pushing him down due to his injury history and the fact that he's an older prospect. than some of the other receivers are. So people have been pushing him down, but I think he's still going to go higher than people expect him to go. Like I said, it kind of feels like Ted McMillan from last year, where it's like a guy who everybody's been talking about throughout the draft process, who everybody knows is going to be an elite player, but people just want to talk about some of the other guys, so they're going to push him down. But I still think Tyson goes a lot higher than a lot of people believe he will. And I think um, you'd be surprised how high Tyson goes, despite most people ranking him closer to the 20s than top 10. We're on to Denzel Boston for Washington. Yeah, and also an older wide receiver, but doesn't have the injuries that Tyson has, and is one of those like tier two receivers that could end up going him, Casey Concepcion, maybe a guy like Malachi Fields, maybe one of the Indiana guys. Like they're kind of like a tier two where it's like these guys could be um later first round picks for a team that maybe needs a receiver but isn't going to get one of the elite prospects um of the receiver class, but still a phenomenal pick. And I mean, he compares him to Cortland Sutton, which I don't hate because he is a big body guy, not like a DK Metcalf, but like a Cortland Sutton, a big body guy who can make those down the field plays, and whoever snags him will get an elite player who will help out that receiver core and give it a new element. Moving on to 19, Omar Cooper out of Indiana. Speaking of one of the Indiana receivers, wow, this is a lot higher than I thought he would have gone, as he's actually newly ranked on this big board 2.0. And I mean, he could go in the first round. He is like he doesn't have the pedigree of a typical first round receiver, but I mean this year he was amazing, especially that touchdown against Penn State at the game winner, which was incredible. Um, but a guy who would end up going in the first round, if we see like Boston and Concepcion and Tyson, maybe those guys go a lot higher. You could see because there's always guys who like sneak into the first round that you don't expect to, but like you're like, oh hey, if that guy goes in the first round, it wouldn't surprise me, but it'd be a little interesting to see. Moving on to 20 with Akeem Mesidor. And I mean, like Mesidor is an older brother. He's gonna be 25 um when his rookie year starts. And if he were to be a first round pick, his rookie contract would end when he'd be 30. So that is, very interesting, but it is a premier position at edge rusher. And, his amazing playoff run with Miami alongside his teammate Ruben Bain might end up pushing him to the first round. Like we could see a team that like maybe is like in win now mode saying, hey, we can get a guy who maybe doesn't have the potential of these other guys, but can come in and play well enough where it's like we don't need to, you know, have him on a learning curve. Um, so I wouldn't hate it, and Mesidor could end up being a first round pick when it's all said and done because like outside of the top three edge rushers, the rest of the edge class is very interesting because not a lot of guys are three down players. They're mostly designated pass rushers, um, where it's like they're not great against the run. So it'll be interesting at the combine to see how some of these guys play because we could see these edge rushers, rising up big boards and going a lot higher in mocks if they're able to show out at the combine and show that they can be top players. Moving on to Cassius Howell, another edge rusher from this class, and I mean Howell's only weakness is that he has short arms, and apparently like no Pro Bowler, All Pro player has ever had as short of arms as he has. So that is a very valid concern. The production's there. He's an elite pass rusher, can get after the quarterback better than many guys in this class. And hey, maybe um he ends up going in the first round because teams say he has the production. Maybe if we just move him around, not don't put him on like one side the entire game. Maybe he can work out. So maybe Cassius Howell, still like I think he can be a first round pick. He's better than his teammate Shamar Stewart, who went in the first round last year. It's just his short arms. But the production's there. Whenever a pass rusher has production in college, it always tends to work out. So I think he will work out, and I think he'll be a pretty good prospect for whoever adds him. Around at 22 with CJ Allen, the second linebacker here, and I mean Kirby Smart knows how to um, build them or knows how to make these linebackers elite. Another guy who can be a first round pick, um, and give whoever he gets selected to, um, an elite guy, in the middle of the field, and yeah. We're on to 23 with Dylan Thieneman, the other safety that could end up going in the first round. Thieneman, the Purdue transfer, actually was mocked a lot to be a first rounder and kind of compete with Caleb Downs for safety one. He didn't have as great of a year, which is why, him and Downs are kind of far apart. But then Thieneman could end up going like if EMW could, like goes like top 20, we could see Thieneman end up going later, like late first round, if we see like if Downs goes top 10 and then um McNeil Warren ends up going like top 15, top 20, then Thieneman could slip his way into being a first round pick in a safety class where you don't see many multiple safeties in one class. Like last time it was 22, but that was Kyle Hamilton and then Lewis Cine. So you rarely see like more than two guys go, but we could see three end up going in this first round because of how talented the safety class is from top to bottom. Then on the 24 with Blake Miller, one of the few um, Clemson players who actually had a good year. Because a lot of those guys, Peter Woods, TJ Parker, Cade Klubnik, Antonio Williams, had down years and aren't going to go as high as maybe most people would presume. But Miller and Avion Terrell were kind of the only two Clemson prospects to have good years and improve their draft stock. And in a tackle class where it's the top two guys and then a bunch of other guys who could be first rounders, we can see him, Monroe Freeling, Max Ihanachor, Caleb Lomu, Caden Proctor. Like there's a lot of guys in that later half of the first round who are kind of in discussion for tackle three. And I think Blake Miller could end up being that if a team, sees his size, sees how great he is, um, maybe says we'd rather take a guy who had a good year, who played well, instead of taking a risk on a guy who, like a Caden Proctor, who has the potential but didn't really show it a lot this past year. Moving on to Monroe Freeling, another one of those tackles that kind of moved up the draft board. Um, and was amazing. And like Blake Miller could go, earlier than people expect because in a class where the tackles aren't like unlike other classes where like there's elite tackle play and you don't want to miss out on one of these guys. There's top two and then the rest. And like Miller, Freeland could end up being that next tackle off the board. Teams rather take a guy who they believe they can just plug in and he can play well instead of a guy like Caden Proctor, um, or some of these other guys on like day two or day three who it's like you'd have to maybe work them up. Freeling and Miller are guys who maybe could be plug and play right tackles from the beginning. We're on to 26 with Colt Hood. The DJ has falling 10 spots. Yeah, Hood, who thanks to Jamal McCoy's injury, had an amazing um, junior year because he was able to be that corner one and play amazingly. We'll see how he does at the combine and if he's able to maybe push himself back up. Because it felt like after the season, it felt like he was maybe pushing Jamal McCoy to be like corner two in this class. But then he had a decent Senior Bowl week, but clearly something happened that has pushed him down a lot of people's boards. And maybe teams are saying, hey, we'd rather go with, Brandon Cisse or I'm trying to think, maybe a Keith Abney from Arizona State. Maybe they want to go one of those guys over, maybe Avion Terrell over Colton Hood. And Hood has the talent, played in the SEC, which a lot of people covet as, an elite football factory. So he played against some of the best competition in the world and showed out. So I think he'll still be a first rounder, but maybe teams, are maybe saying, can he be a true corner one? Or is his limitations going to hurt him? 27 with Lee Hunter, in a defensive tackle class where there was a lot of hype for other guys, it really hasn't, measured. And Hunter has been one who amazing Senior Bowl and kind of has been pushed up. Um, there is a concern with the pad level and if it's too high, will he be able to perform? But if it's at the right number, he can be able to play it like one of the best. And in a D tackle class where there's a lot of names, but there's not a lot of proven production from 2025, Hunter could be a guy who ends up pushing himself into the first round because a team needs a defensive tackle, needs a um, interior defensive lineman to help out, and he might just end up going a lot higher than maybe people believe. Moving on to 28 with Keldrick Falk, another one of the edge rushers where, like, he has the potential, but it's not all there. Like, he's a great run defender, but his pass rush, as DJ says, is not that great. Like, he's a great run defender, which you like in an edge rusher because you don't want them to just be a guy who is just, just going after the quarterback, just, being a pass rusher. You want them to be a full defensive lineman if they're going to be a starter, but his pass rush leaves a lot to, um, you know, a lot to, I'm not sure what the word is, but it leaves a lot of curiousness where it's like, can he be a long term starter at the edge position if he's not really able to be an actual pass rusher and he's more so just a guy who is going to stop the run and occasionally get after the quarterback. Moving on to Caden Proctor. I mean, Proctor had like he showed some flashes this year. So he does have the talent, but he just didn't show it a lot this year. Like he was beaten a lot by guys, um, especially early on in Alabama's schedule. He was getting, dominated by edge rushers. He did start to play well down the stretch, but there's still a lot left there. And a guy who is 6'7", 360, I want to say, around that. Um, a lot of people are comparing him to another Alabama tackle who was huge, and Evan Neal, who hasn't worked out, and who knows if he's going to be in the NFL in 2026. And Proctor, who has the potential, has the talent there. It's just maybe he needs to be developed into that player that everybody says he can be, but he is one where it's like you're drafting him based off his potential and not really his play this past season. Moving on to 30 with Avion Terrell, obviously the younger brother of AJ Terrell, and a phenomenal corner who more than likely will be a nickel because of his size, being, I think, 5'11", 185 or around that. But will be a coveted corner because, I mean, in this league, you can't really have enough. Like, you need corners in this league, and Terrell can be a phenomenal pick for whoever, um, for whoever is going to need a corner and a guy who really can be coveted because, while he's small in stature and not that big of a corner, a lot of people remember Nate Wiggins, being a smaller corner out of Clemson. He's worked out. Terrell can be that same type of player for whoever drafts him and be an instant impact player. Moving on to 31 with Caleb Lomo. Yeah, another one of those tackles where, he has the talent, has the ability. Unlike Caden Proctor, he has the he has the ready-made playability. Like Proctor's more of like a potential pick. But a guy who had a good year at Utah this past year, but still isn't a elite prospect compared to his teammate Fano, and couldn't end up falling out of the first round um, because of that. But I think still, has a lot of proven track record of playing elite at the left tackle position, and he could go a lot higher if a team, kind of like we said with Freeling and Miller, wants a guy who's proven. And Lomo is another guy who's like he's proven to play well, and it might just end up helping him out. And on to 32 with TJ Parker. Yeah, I mean, a guy who preseason was a top 5 player in the class. I mean, he he was, being projected as like, Abdul Carter from, or no, he was being projected kind of like the way, I'm trying to think. He was kind of being like projected as like an elite edge rusher, kind of like Dallas Turner in 2024, where like he's not a generational edge rusher, but he's an elite player. He just did not have that great of a year. Now he showed it at the Senior Bowl, clearly pushed himself back into being a first round player, but a guy who is more potential than product might, push him up the board, but it might also leave a lot to desire from a team if they're going with a guy who doesn't have proven production but has the talent available to have that proven production. On to Casey Concepcion. Yeah, I mean, a guy who I'm not sure who I'd compare him to, but a guy who can be a deep um, threat downfield. Like he can be a big play machine. We showed it at A&M where he can make those elite plays, and a guy who I think right now is wide receiver 5 in this class. Obviously, if DJ disagrees, he's got Omar Cooper ahead of him, but I think Concepcion can be a first round pick, and you put him on a team like the Bills or like trying to think of like the Broncos, who actually it was revealed Davis Webb's going to be calling plays, not Sean Payton, which I think could help this Denver team out because it was clear Sean Payton was not the entire reason the team offense wasn't that great, but clearly had his limitations as play caller, and um, I think will help Denver out in 2026. But I think Concepcion, you know, could easily be, maybe a top. I don't want to say top wide receiver in this class, but I think he could end up being that because of how talented he is. And this guy was a ACC I think ACC Freshman of the Year back in 2023. So he has the talent, has the um proven production, and a guy who is a lot talented than I think 33. We're on to 34 with Max Ihanachor. Yeah, I mean this guy, um, really a cool story because he lives in Nigeria until he's 13. Then he moves to the U.S. Um, and starts playing football in high school. He hasn't played that much. He goes to a junior college, right? You know, plays there, then sends out the tape and is able to come to Arizona State and you know be really good. And another tackle who's kind of boosted his stock from the Senior Bowl, um, and also since the season's been over, his stock has just been rising. And a guy who could be a late first rounder. I mean, he can go ahead of guys who maybe you would think would be first round picks, but might end up sliding out. And Ihanachor could end up going a lot higher than most people believe. And it's a cool story for a guy who didn't start playing football until he was in high school and is really inspirational. Moving on to 35 with Caden McDonald. And here goes the run of the defensive tackles with the name, but not the production. I mean, McDonald early on in the season felt like another Ohio State player going in the first round, but his talent started to, I mean, his play started to go down as the season went along. And unlike a lot of his Ohio State teammates, has kind of fallen out of the first round. Now, still has the proven production, still has the talent to be a first rounder, but a guy who, um, there's big concerns with him, um, about how, great of a player will he actually be at the next level. Could end up hurting him and pushing him down out of the first round. Went on at 236 with Caleb Banks. Speaking of these defensive tackles, I mean, if Banks had played in all of 2025, he might be a top 15 pick at least because of how talented he is. But he only played in 3 games. Now he has the proven production in 2024, but kind of like Jermon McCoy, you know, when you barely play the following year, it is going to dock you. It is going to hurt you, even though he had an incredible Senior Bowl and really lit up a lot of those offensive linemen. But a guy who, you know, might not go as high as maybe he was perceived to be because he missed most of 2025, because he missed a lot of time, but he could still be a first rounder and still be, a top 20, 25 pick when it's all said and done. Went on a 37 with Brandon Cisse, the South Carolina corner. Yeah, I mean, Cisse kind of seen as kind of like corner, maybe like 5 or 6, I want to say around that. Um, see it as like a late first round, early day two pick, and a corner who, has the size, has the speed that you covet, but maybe isn't going to wow people at the combine, and maybe some other guys will go ahead because they were a lot more consistent in 2025 than he was. Right on to 38 with Peter Woods, another guy like his Clemson teammate in TJ Parker has the potential, has the talent, but just didn't show it. Like Parker was seen as a top 5, top 10 player in this class preseason. Falling down, still could be a first rounder, especially if he shows out at the combine and is amazing. But another guy who might just end up, he has the name, but maybe isn't going to go as high because the production wasn't there. And maybe teams wonder if, he was great as a freshman, but kind of took steps back the last 2 years. And people might say, hey, is he really that great, or was he just too hyped up back in his freshman year? Moving on to 39 with R. Mason Thomas. One of the um edge rushers, where it's like he's more of a DPR, designated pass rusher, than anything. He's more so a guy where it's like you bring him in on like first and second, like you bring him in on like when it's like third and long when you need to get after the quarterback. Not really on those early downs when teams are going to be running the ball because he's not that great. But hey, we've seen a lot of guys who come into the league aren't the great against the run, but are able to develop that skill, and maybe Thomas is able to do that, and he's able to um, work it out and become better against the run, where he's a full defensive lineman and not just a pass rusher. Moving on to 40 with Ty Simpson. Yeah, this is around the range like Simpson as a prospect is a day two, second round, third round pick. But because of the QB need, because of how teams covet quarterbacks, he's going to go maybe late first round, maybe early day two, because teams need him. Like remember Will Levis, like he was like one of the first picks on day two because he fell out of the first round, but a team was going to scoop him up. Um, but Simpson, like he doesn't have the talent, or he doesn't have the production because he only started for 1 year. He has the talent. He also like is not that athletic. Like usually, like these guys who like get pushed up into the first round are usually these like athletic guys. Like Jackson Dart last year. Lamar Jackson, even a guy like Malik Willis. Like they had like and intangibles where it's like teams were like going to covet those and maybe make them first round picks. Simpson doesn't really have that, but you know he has like the Nick Saban tag as a quarterback, and he also has the IQ and has the play style where it's like teams will say, hey, that guy could end up being our quarterback down the line into the future. Went on to 41 with Christian Miller, the D tackle from Georgia. DJ has falling 4 spots, and yeah, I mean Miller, like he says, has the ideal size and average length for a defensive tackle, and in a D tackle class where there's a lot of high profile names, but not a lot of guys with proven track record of having elite years. Christian Miller could be a guy on like day two. Well, we'll be a guy on day two where it's like if you just want a guy who will, be a guy who can contribute right away as a defensive tackle, he's the guy. Where it's like the other ones are more so guys who have the potential but might flash it throughout the rookie year, while Miller's going to give you like proven production I'm at a 42 with Anthony Hill. Yeah, this is a linebacker class that is very talented. We can see at least two, maybe three guys um in the first round, which is rare, kind of like linebacker and safety kind of could end up having multiple guys in the first round. And Hill, has the size, the speed, the athleticism that you covet from a middle linebacker, but didn't have that great of a year to where a lot of people hoped he would be. But still, I think is a phenomenal talent, and I think is a day two guy where it's like, if you want to get, your middle linebacker, the guy that can eventually be, you know, that Fred Warner type of player, Anthony Hill might be able to do that. Went on to 43 with Jadarian Price, the second running back. Yeah, there's a big gap between Love and whoever you have as the second guy. His Notre Dame teammate Jadarian Price. Yeah, like I think we're gonna see a lot of guys go on day two and day three. Like you're gonna see Love, and then there's gonna be this huge gap between whenever the next running back is. But still, I'm excited to see a lot of these running backs at the combine to see, maybe one of these guys could be pushed up to like early day two. Because there's no Marion Hampton in this class. So like there's no true wide running back two behind Jeremiah Love, which I think is interesting because there's a lot of guys with the talent, with the production that could be day two guys that you could say, hey, that guy can be our franchise running back. We're on a 44 with Malachi Fields, another Notre Dame player. Yeah, he had a phenomenal Senior Bowl. Really rose up the draft boards. I've seen people, including myself, have him going in the first round because of how talented he is. And he could end up being a first round pick. He could end up being a day two, um, second round, third round guy, and a guy who, you know, gives you um um elite size and skill at the wide receiver position. Could be, a day two team where it's like they're not gonna be able to draft a guy on day one. Like maybe it's like the Giants, like they go tackle and then they want to get, wide receiver two behind besides the next two Malik Neighbors and Fields could be that guy. We could maybe see like other teams covet him the way he is. Went on to 45 with Keontae Scott, another Miami player who really had a great run, help on the national championship on the defensive side, where he's going to be pushed up the board and a day two corner. He kind of reminds me of Cam Kitchens in a sense, where it's like he's a day two guy who isn't going to give you, first round type play, but can be a reliable guy out there for the team. And I think a team is going to covet him, although he is an older prospect at 24. So, that might hinder his value to teams. We're on to Antonio Williams, the Clemson receiver, who preseason I think was at least in the conversation to be a first round guy because of Clemson having all this hype. Didn't have as great of a year, was banged up, but has, the talent, has the production from the past couple of years where he can be a legit um wide receiver too. And I think a team in this range, because there's a lot of guys like Malachi Fields, Antonio Williams, Zach Branch, Chris Bell, Elijah Surratt, Skylar Bell. Like there's a lot of guys on day two at the wide receiver position where teams will covet those guys because it's kind of a three-horse race at the wide receiver position, and then kind of like a couple guys on the later half of the first round, and then day two and day three, you're going to see a lot of guys go because there's a lot of talent there, and teams are going to covet those receivers. 47 was Zion Young, a guy who he's one of the like projected day two, day three edge rushers, more so day two. But he has he's a three down player. Like I said with our Mason Thomas, but he's more of a designated pass rusher. Zion Young is great against the run, great as a pass rusher. Could end up pushing himself into the first round, which I think I ended up having in my um mock draft from a couple of weeks ago after the Super Bowl. And a guy who is going to show out the combine, and I think could really push himself into being a first round talent because outside of the top three guys, the rest of the edge rusher class, it's very you know it's very teams are going to choose who they like next, and Young could be a guy who could skyrocket up that board. 48 is Jack Golday from Cincinnati, the linebacker. Yeah, another um talented linebacker in this class, a day two guy, kind of like Anthony Hill. Another you know elite or not elite, but another good linebacker prospect on day two who can give you that proven production, give you um a top linebacker that you can be able to put out there day one, and he can be an impact player. 49 is Deion Burks, the Oklahoma receiver who um didn't like a couple years ago, I think maybe it was last year, had like first round hype. Didn't end up getting there, but kind of like Antonio Williams, has the proven production. He just, wasn't on the greatest offense to be, and had some injuries that hurt him. But just like Antonio Williams, a guy who, with his name, with his proven production, will be a star at the next level. And then finally, 50 is Zach Branch, um, the Georgia receiver, who knows where he ends up going, because he's gonna run fast at the combine because he is a track star, and he has the talent because he was at Georgia this past year and was amazing. Um, and another wide receiver like Antonio Williams, like Deion Burks, who has the name, has the talent there, and unlike those guys, he doesn't have the proven production, but a guy who really could be coveted by a team. But that'll do it for Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 Big Board 2.0. Some of the guys he actually left off were Chris Braswell, the Tennessee wide receiver, Chase Basantis, the guard from A&M, and Chris Bell, the Louisville receiver. But yeah, that'll do it for today's video. Hope you guys hope you guys comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And until the next video, hope you guys have a great day, and bye.